Halo Reach was a contractual obligation. Nobody really wants to hear that, probably. You want to think that the games you love were made with passion and creative drive. But the truth is, Bungie was done with Halo after Halo 3. They wanted to move on. But Microsoft wanted more Halo games, so in a series of long and arduous negotiations, they bought their freedom with 1.5 more Halo games. ODST and Halo Reach. ODST as a side project gave them a lot of creative freedom to get weird and experimental, but Reach was the next mainline game, and just like the rest it would have to be bigger, better, and outsell everything that came before. The result is interesting. Top of the field artists and developers working on a project that none of them are really all that passionate about. Halo Reach is a good game, but for the first time in the Halo series, it's a game that's chasing the trends rather than setting them. The shadow of Call of Duty looms larger than ever over Halo Reach. Halo Reach is probably the Halo game I've played the most, and maybe potentially one of the games I've played the most in my entire life. Halo 3 was my first Halo game, but Halo Reach was my game. It hit me at just the right time. I was 12 years old, all of my friends had gotten their own Xboxes by then, so for about 2 to 3 years, we would just play it every day. Come home from school, play Halo Reach. This isn't a joke. I met my first girlfriend playing Halo Reach. We didn't start dating until years after that, but still, it's how we met. I even own this. Remember when collector's editions actually came with the game? Imagine that. Not exactly in the best of condition, but still probably the most utility I've ever gotten out of any Christmas present I've ever owned, if we're being totally honest. It's a very strange feeling then that when I turned my game critic brain on, this game that occupied so much of my childhood is easily the worst of the Bungie era Halo games by a good margin. It's not a bad game, but it is a very messy game, and I think it's really interesting that Halo 4 ended up with the Call of Duty Halo label, when thematically and tonally, Halo Reach is borrowing from that well way more than Halo 4 ever did. Reach leans into the military of military sci-fi way more than any other Halo game, and it's really, really clear what they're doing. They're trying to make the game as much like Modern Warfare as they can get away with. But the merger of these two styles is awkward, at least on the campaign side. As we've discussed before in this series, the campaign largely doesn't matter to the larger success of these games. Tone and story pacing don't matter at all to a multiplayer match. Halo is about super soldiers with the heavy armour and rechargeable shields. The power fantasy of Halo comes from being strong. Call of Duty is about regular soldiers. You only take a few hits to die, and the power fantasy comes from prevailing despite that inherent weakness. These two ideas are kind of at odds, and that leads to some strange issues with Halo Reach. On top of all of that, it's still trying to be Bungie's Halo swan song. It's full of references and Easter eggs and lore critical moments for superfans to chew on, despite also trying to court a new audience. It feels like playing through a game studio's crisis in confidence, like nobody was really sure what they wanted this game to be. These winding directions are the reason the game is so divisive. Some people love it and consider it to be the peak of Halo. Some people hate it and consider it to be a compromised disappointment. I've put far too much of myself into the game to ever consider it bad, but even then, I think I land somewhere in the middle. And hey, as a critic, there's nothing more interesting to unpack than a mess. Predestination is the driving force of Halo Reach's story. From the beginning, you know how it ends. Reach is the planet that the Autumn was fleeing at the start of Halo 1. Master Chief is the last Spartan. This is a game set on Reach, starring a team of Spartans. Everyone knows going into this game that it's not going to have a happy ending. Knowing how things are going to end is a common prequel problem which Reach sidesteps by embracing wholeheartedly. You know from the first shot of the game that you're going to lose eventually, that the helmet you just put on will end up in a smouldering field of glass. This inherent bleakness is the thing that triggers the chain reaction of a whole bunch of changes that makes this game feel totally different from any of the previous Halo games. The trilogy has its dark moments, but they ultimately come down on the side of hope. There is no hope in Halo Reach, at least not until the very end. To accommodate that bleakness and feeling of loss, Reach needs some characters who can die. So, we get Noble Team. That seems a bit blunt, but honestly in replaying the game that's exactly how it feels. Noble Team is a very 2010 team. Their characters feel engineered to tap into a different idea of what badass means to a 13-year-old in 2010, to ensure that each player feels attached to at least one of them so that it'll sting more when each of them dies. Noble 1, the leader, is Carter, who looks and acts like your typical Call of Duty protagonist with his short crew-cut hair and scars. He's the one that's meant to be cool if you're into that classic stoic soldier man archetype. Noble 2 is Kat, the femme fatale tech wizard with the robot arm. She's the one who's meant to be cool if you're a girl or into the badass ladies. Noble 3 is June, the sassy sniper with the face tattoo. He's supposed to be cool if you think stealth is the coolest thing soldiers can do. Noble 4 is Emil, the most 2010s of the bunch, the guy with a skull carved into his helmet. He's pretty much a one-for-one adaptation of Modern Warfare 2's Ghost. He's a bit of a dick, he has a giant knife on his shoulder, and he loves murder. He's the one who's supposed to be cool if you've got doodles of Shadow the Hedgehog on your school notebook. Noble 5 is George, the big guy in heavy armour with a chain gun. He's the one that's supposed to be cool if you think being big and bulky and strong is the coolest thing you can be. And finally, there is Noble 6, your player character. Noble 6 is a little different, being that their appearance and even gender are player determined, since they use the appearance and gender of your multiplayer Spartan customization. They do talk, but only rarely and for generic yes sir type dialogue. Overall, the feeling of Noble Team is extremely generic. They're a pack of characters that you could reasonably expect to find in any military shooter from the time, just wearing more colourful armour. ODST's squad also relied on these same archetypes, but ODST got around that with bold casting, allowing for the strong personalities of Firefly to shine through. Reach's squad are hampered by the very deliberate way the game is written. Any characterization is filtered through the lens of military professionalism in a Modern Warfare kind of way. There's a particular character to the writing of the Halo trilogy. It can be big and operatic at times, but for the most part it's written in a very human way. An often praised element of the trilogy is the ambient dialogue of the NPC Marines. It's often weird and funny and very memorable.
Tank beats everything! Oh, man! I can do this all day!
It seems I've crossed the circuit.
Well, let me have a look.
Oracle!
Little bastard stung me!
Call of Duty dialogue isn't written like this. Characters may crack jokes, but the jokes aren't really there to be funny or make you laugh. They're there to establish that the character is a bit of a jokester to make them seem more badass. That's the way Halo Reach is written, and it's a very different vibe.
Commander, we just lost our signal with HQ.
Backup channels.
Searching. Nada. Can't say what's jamming us.
You heard her. Dead zone confirmed. Command will not be keeping us company this trip.
I'm lonely already.
So that's one issue Noble Team is facing. The other is that as far as the script is concerned, they're all expendable. In fact, they're very deliberately written to die in various dramatic ways. That's why the game leans so heavily on these archetypes. It's not even halfway through the campaign when they start dying off, so you need to have a strong idea of who they are immediately if a player is expected to care about those deaths. I can't speak to my personal engagement with these characters when I first played the game. I was 12, I probably thought it was amazing, but in playing through all the games again, Noble Team just doesn't hold a candle to the personality of Johnson or Cortana or even minor characters like Miranda and Lord Hood. They're not characters designed to have arcs. They're stagnant. They're designed to have just enough badass or memorable moments that you feel sad when they die. I know this is all sounding horribly negative, and while I do think this is a less interesting approach to storytelling, it's not an invalid one. Like Modern Warfare, Halo Reach is just less about the characters and more about the overarching narrative. Noble Team is your window into the greater story of the fall of Reach. It's not about Noble Team in the way that the trilogy is about Master Chief and the Arbiter. More than even the Rookie and ODST, Noble 6 is a vessel for the player, not a character with depth and nuance. Halo Reach isn't about the characters. Halo Reach is about the vibes, man. There There's a delicate balance to be struck when you're telling a story where the player loses in a game like this. The mechanical truth is that you can't lose. Even if you do die, you'll just respawn. Any fight that you're participating in, you have to win. What Reach does is continually undermine those victories within the wider narrative. Did you just single-handedly enter a Covenant spire, kill everyone aboard, and drop the shield so the cruiser could take it down? Cool. That cruiser just got blown up by a ship 10 times the size that was waiting for this exact opportunity. Did you just come up with a great plan to destroy that massive ship with a converted warp drive in a sneaky infiltration mission that went off almost perfectly? Cool. 50 more of them just showed up. You may be winning the battles, but you're clearly losing the war. One of the biggest victories you score in the whole game is distracting a Covenant ship so that refugees can escape. Which, sure, it's great that you got those refugees out, but evacuating refugees is a pretty clear sign that things are not going super well on the front. This could easily come across as very annoying, winning the gameplay, losing the cutscene scenario that can make your efforts feel pointless. Your efforts are never nullified per se. When you set out to do something, you do accomplish it, it's just that the scale of the battle increases each time and renders those accomplishments insignificant in the larger scale. It's a series of escalating Pyrrhic victories. You win, but it's very hard to feel good about it. Halo Reach is a pretty massive downer compared to the previous games, and I don't say that in a negative way. That's exactly what it's out to be, and it does it very well. The game's use of music is impeccable for establishing this tone of loss and failure. An important creative choice that Reach makes in this regard is resetting the Covenant as a villain. Since Halo 2, the Covenant have spoken English. This is used both to humanise them and their motivations on the Arbiter side of things, and for comedy during the firefights, as grunts especially will often make lots of silly remarks. In Reach, the Covenant are back to speaking in their incomprehensible alien languages, and pretty much any characterization or motivation is dropped. They're not a threat that's meant to be understood, they're just an unrelenting, overwhelming force. No negotiation, no surrender. All of the Covenant's designs have been altered to make them look more aggressive and more dangerous, even the grunts. This isn't war against the Covenant, it's slaughter. There's no surprise second faction in Reach, it's Covenant for the whole time, and as such it's probably the best out of any of the games at demonstrating why the Covenant are such an imposing threat. Just maybe don't think about how canonically our good friend the Arbiter is in charge of this attack, because it might dampen your opinion of him somewhat. The art style shift, though, isn't just limited to the Covenant. The entire game's look is quite a drastic departure from the trilogy, and if I'm being totally honest, I'm not a fan. Everything is way more drab and muted, the environments are painted in greys and browns, and I don't think the sky is blue at any point in the game. Coming from Halo 3, the difference is obvious and stark. The designs of the Spartans and all the equipment is way more angular with lots of tiny intricate details. While this grittier design is definitely appropriate for the story, it's hard not to see it as the Call of Duty influence seeping through again. This grungy realism as the 2010 look sparked almost entirely from Modern Warfare. It could just be a coincidence, but the thing that really clinches it for me are the pre-mission briefings with the tactical map. They're almost identical to the mission introductions from Modern Warfare.
Roger on location. Repeating, map grid 527619er. Over.
Bravo 6 copies. Over.
Bravo 6, we have an Abrams dead in the water. Call sign, Warpig. Lieutenant Vasquez, your unit is shotgun. Over.
Large Covenant deployments have occurred undetected, and we are now under attack across the Vieri territory, including orbital defenses. As per the winter contingency, we are countering on every front.
Yeah, I think that's a slam dunk. Even some of the mission structures and scripted segments feel very reminiscent of Modern Warfare, like these turreted on-rails helicopter moments, which are pretty much one for one with similar segments in Modern Warfare. What I don't know is how cynical this shift in art and tone was. It's not like a developer is ever going to admit to changing their art style in a cynical attempt to make people think your game is more like another more popular game, and it does fit the story of the game well enough. It's a bit of a chicken or egg situation. Did the tone of the game dictate the change in art style, or did the change in art style dictate the change in tone? The Halo art team by this point are a well-oiled machine. They know how to push this kind of art direction to the best it can be. I think the Halo Reach looks better than Modern Warfare 2, at least in environmental design. Ultimately, I guess it doesn't matter which came first. The game is what it is, and despite doing well by the style, it's pretty clear to me that Bungie wasn't super happy with it. Since for their next game they went back to a much more colourful direction, as does Halo 4, but, well, that's a whole different ballgame. I think the vibes are enough for most people to cover the very prevalent flaws in the writing of this campaign. It's not that the campaign is full of plot holes, but a lot of it is extremely messy or contrived. The first mission, before Noble Team has discovered the Covenant, spends some time hinting at the relationship between the UNSC and the regular people of the galaxy, with the suggestion that comms have been cut by rebels, and the few civilians that you do meet in the level being harshly distrustful of the UNSC. In the lore, Spartans were created before first contact with the Covenant. They were designed to crush insurgents, because the UNSC before the war was kind of a corrupt military state. This has always been true, since before Halo 1 even came out, that lore was established in the prequel book, The Fall of Reach, which tells the story of what Master Chief was doing around this time. But the trilogy never even once hints at that story element. The UNSC and Master Chief are pretty unambiguous heroes, and after the Covenant are fully established on Reach, it's dropped entirely from this game too, and we're back to seeing Spartans and the UNSC as unquestioned heroes. I think it's an interesting story beat to try and tackle, that the UNSC are basically bad guys given the moral high ground due to a coincidental alien invasion, but you have to actually do something with that idea for me to give you credit for it. In the game as it stands, it feels more like a reference than any kind of actual story element. Another big one like that is Dr. Halsey, one of the most important people in the entire Halo universe, because she's the person who created both the Spartan program and Cortana. And she's also Miranda Keyes' mother and the mentor of Halo Wars, Professor Anders. She shows up for a couple of missions in this game, and it really does feel that way. She just shows up. It's very much a moment for the superfans when she does show up, because the game kind of expects you to know how important she is. And I do, so I guess that's fine. But there's still a very odd dynamic between Halsey and Noble Team. The Spartan program that made Master Chief was pretty messed up. They kidnapped children, brainwashed them, injected them with a bunch of chemicals and cybernetics, and put them through extremely harsh training to become super soldiers, pretty much against their will. She's a bad person who did immoral experiments that led to the deaths of most of the candidates, but in the end her actions helped save humanity, so she's a hero. Knowing that, you think there'd be a lot more complex emotions by a team of Spartans towards Halsey, but through an extremely tangential bit of side lore, Noble Team, with the exception of George, are not Halsey's Spartans. She made the Spartan 2 program. The Spartan 3 program is where the rest of Noble Team were made from, which is basically like a cheap knockoff of the Spartan 2 program. That's why they're smaller and a little less bulky. Spartan 3s never show up in any game before or after this. We're supposed to assume that absolutely all of them died here on Reach. And by the way, absolutely none of this is explained within the game itself. This is all external lore. The game tries to explore that dynamic a bit with the difference in the way Halsey talks to George compared to the rest of the team, but it's only really a brief moment that hints at a much deeper story.
What I do require is a detailed account of your previous engagement. George, it's been too long.
Mom.
What have you done with my armor?
Just some additions I've made.
Indeed.
If you want to learn more about what's going on in this interaction, then here's some homework you can do. In case it wasn't clear by now, I've never read any of the Halo novels. I'm more of a fan wiki browser myself. My collector's edition of Reach actually came with Dr. Halsey's journal, and despite many attempts to read it over the years, I've never been able to read the entire thing, because, frankly, the notebook of a fictional scientist who's canonically an egotistical jerk who tortured children is just not that engaging. All of this stuff is explored in much more detail when we get to Halo 4. Here in Reach, it feels like another road not taken. Halsey's actual place in the story is mostly to be cryptic and mysterious about a discovery on Reach, which of course turns out to be a Forerunner structure, the thing the Covenant are really after. That's also tied to what I feel must be a dropped plotline of some variety, although I have no idea how. Everything involving this girl that Noble Team find on the first mission. We linger on this random girl for a while. She's the daughter of the scientist who was killed there working for Halsey. George has a moment with her, and then she never shows up for the rest of the game. Maybe I'm alone in feeling like this was supposed to be the introduction of an important character in the game, but the fact that we spent so long on this one teenager makes me think she was supposed to play a bigger role in the game that ended up being cut. It certainly wouldn't be the first time major cuts were made to a Halo game.
It was just after we found your scientist's daughter, Mom. She was hiding in the...
Irrelevant.
So with all these writing issues and tonal shifts, specifically all these Call of Duty influences that we're not supposed to talk about because Halo is so much better than those stinky, smelly COD games, why is it that Halo Reach is considered by so many to be one of, if not the best game in the series? Well, it's because at the end of the day, no matter what skin you put on it, Reach is still a Halo game. We've still got the rechargeable shields, the focus on wider open arenas with vehicle combat and objective-based matches, the same mechanics we've always had, refined to the best they can be for this era with a couple of new mechanics to enhance them. Halo Reach, from a game design perspective, might be the most tightly designed game in the whole series. Mechanically, Reach borrows nothing from Call of Duty, which is how it escaped the COD Halo label despite all the aesthetic similarities. For example, an FPS feature that became pretty much mandatory after Call of Duty popularised it is aim-down sights. It's so basic it seems strange to even need to point it out, but it's the thing where you can zoom in while shooting. In older games, this is a thing you can only do with particular weapons, like a sniper rifle. And that's a tradition that Halo keeps up. The assault rifle doesn't have a scope, so you can't zoom in. In Call of Duty, you can zoom in and fire with any weapon, even if it makes no real tactical sense, like with a shotgun. It's just a core part of the controls. And generally, that's what players are used to now. Whatever gun you're holding can zoom in. That's not just standard now, that was the standard when Halo Reach came out. But in a boldly retro move, Reach rejects that baseline mechanic, continuing to make zooming in a tactical feature of particular weapons, and continuing to refine the arena-based multiplayer instead of the loadout-based one. What reason is there not to let people zoom in with an assault rifle? Well, it fundamentally changes the feel and functionality of the weapon. You can't use the assault rifle at long range, it's a mid to short range weapon and that's where it works best. Since it's usually the starting weapon, the entire match is going to be a lot more up close and personal, and having a ranged weapon becomes a much more distinct tactical advantage. With the addition of assassinations, flashy one-hit kills if you hit someone from behind, there's a lot of incentive to play close range, and the DMR's slow rate of fire means that up close, the guy with the assault rifle still has the advantage if you can't aim properly. You can actually see the difference such a minor gameplay mechanic makes by comparing the assault rifle in Halo Reach to the one in Halo Infinite. By the time of Infinite, we've caved to the modern demand of aim-down sights, and it completely changes the utility of the assault rifle. It's way more powerful than it used to be, just by the simple fact that you can hit people with it from further away, and that in turn makes the entire match more of a range game. Reach does add a loadout system, but not one that can be customised by the player. At the start of the match, you can pick from a list, and for the vast majority of matches, all that this will determine is your armour ability. A new mechanic for the game that will give you an extra tool in your arsenal, like a jetpack or the ability to sprint. Which again, in almost every other game from the time would have just been part of your standard controls, but here it's a tactical decision. The ability to run. These mechanical differences make it night and day switching between Call of Duty and Halo. Their baseline for the standard mechanics in an FPS are just fundamentally different. On the campaign side of things, Halo Reach is actually balanced to be much harder than the previous games, not quite to the levels of abject torture that Halo 2 can achieve, but it is a significant step up from Halo 3. The game returns the need for health packs to restore your health in another kind of retro move. But for the weaker Spartan 3s, it's a change that makes sense. You feel a lot more fragile than you ever did in Halo 3, although still tougher than ODST because you've still got your regenerating shields. The enemies are much tougher. High-level elites especially can soak up so much damage and close the distance quickly if you're not careful. They feel more imposing, not just in their design, but mechanically as well. The gameplay is thematically appropriate, but a lot of the missions themselves feel more like riffs on previous Halo game ideas than plot-critical events. Like the third mission, Nightfall, which is clearly a remake of sorts of the nighttime sniper mission from Halo 1. Some sections of the level even feel like a remake of areas in the original game. It's a fine idea to return to, it's pretty much the only mission in the game where June gets to display some personality. But plot-wise, it's doing very little. It reveals that there's a large invasion force amassing on the planet, something you can infer by all the aliens you kill throughout the mission. My favourite mission in the game is New Alexandria, which is clearly a riff on the idea started in ODST. Buck even shows up for a cameo to cement that lineage, and this nightclub actually uses the exact same architecture as an area in ODST. The entire level is like a mini open world with many different objectives to fly around to, and that's a super cool idea. It's just that the objectives themselves are extremely generic, just going around and shutting down some jammers.
Covenant have deployed comm jammers in high-rises across the city. When I find them, you hit them. Hard.
It's hard to feel like it's a very important thing to be doing with the cruisers glassing the city in the background, which is maybe the thematic contention. Your actions being inconsequential is a through line of the entire game, but in this case when the war is already pretty much lost, shutting down some jammers really feels like the least of your worries. The vibes of the mission are fantastic, but if you actually pay attention to what you're doing, then it's just busy work.
This is the last jammer, Six. You're almost there.
I think part of this messiness is the pressure of being the last Halo game and trying to up themselves in spectacle from what Halo 3 did. But there's only so high you can go. Reach has some fantastic action cutscenes, but when you actually enter the gameplay segments, nothing feels nearly as grandiose or dramatic as the massive arenas of Halo 3. Something that you can't really help but notice playing through the campaign is that every mission has at least 1 or 2 points where you go, hey, this is a multiplayer map. Usually not even integrated all that well because multiplayer maps are by their nature kind of designed differently to a single player level. They're designed to be sort of symmetrical with different paths and vantage points across the map for multiple players to use. I don't personally have a problem with this kind of reuse. Some people would call it lazy, but I call it efficient. The issue is that because I've played so much Reach multiplayer, I find it very distracting. It's not like the entire level is reused assets, just 1 or 2 areas, which makes the reuse feel almost superfluous. Because I can tell playing through them that they were designed to be multiplayer maps first. Some of them are even literally multiplayer maps from previous games. The most impressive Reach gets, and it is genuinely impressive, don't get me wrong, is Long Night of Solace, the mission that becomes a flight sim halfway through. It's an entire set of controls and mechanics that only exists for this one mission, and it looks and feels excellent. It's not a realistic looking space field, it's full of colour and spirally nebulas, but that's what makes it stand out so much in my mind. Having a space sim is cool, I understand why they wanted us to get here. It's everything surrounding it that starts to become extremely convenient. A part of that is kind of intentional. When Kat is outlining the plan about how they just happen to be next to a secret spaceship prototype facility that Noble Six just happened to be a part of, it's supposed to be one of those memorable character moments for Kat, showing how smart she is and how she doesn't really care for military secrecy. But it's still exceptionally convenient, even if you lampshade how convenient it is. The bigger one is that this is the mission where Noble Team starts to die off, starting with George. The plan is to use a warp drive as a bomb to blow up the ship, but the bomb is attacked and damaged, so conveniently someone will have to stay and fire it manually. There are Marines in this mission who you can keep alive, but they will cease to exist when this cutscene starts to allow for George's dramatic sacrifice. It's a bit contrived, but it's a good scene which disguises that fact some. Noble Team's deaths only get more contrived from here. Kat's death is easily the worst. The team are running to an underground bunker because the Covenant are glassing the area. There's a line about all the Covenant forces pulling out, but for some reason there's a Phantom just hanging out and a sniper takes out Kat in a single shot despite her being a Spartan in power armor with regenerating shields. It happens for the vibes. The vibes say you need a death here to underline the tragedy of what's happening, and so it contrives an extremely unlikely scenario to make that happen. Carter's death is also pretty dumb, seeing as he gets a fatal injury in the Fade to Black between missions. June manages to make it out alive since he's given babysitting duties to get Halsey off the planet, and Emil dies because Noble Six has to man the big gun because Noble Six wasn't in Halo 1. If you're engaged with Reach on a vibes-based level, then the contrivances of these deaths probably don't bother you. If you're media critic brain poisoned like me, then it's all you can think about. The only death in the game that I think truly works as a creative story moment and a thematic one is Noble Six's. It happens after the credits. Your final mission in the game is a throwback to Halo 1 again, a much more direct one. Your final mission is to take Cortana to the Pillar of Autumn so she can escape Reach. You meet a much more HD Captain Keyes and cover the ship on a big gun as it prepares for takeoff. Then, as the final cutscene of the game, we get a recreation of the opening of Halo 1, bringing the Bungie era of Halo into a nice full circle. not the real ending of Reach. After the credits, or at least where the credits would have been in the game's original release, we come back to Noble Six, still alive, still fighting on the surface of Reach, potentially the last person alive on the planet. The feeling is post-apocalyptic, just desert, ruins, and an endless swarm of Covenant. It's a playable mission. You can hold off the Covenant for as long as you can manage, more and more powerful variants coming after you. But you can't win. Eventually, you'll get a crack in your visor, then another one, and eventually, you'll be overwhelmed. It's one final gut punch that drives home the point that the game has been making the whole time. This is a fight you can't win. You already know how it ends. But you continue to fight anyway, right to the bitter end. But then the game flips the script on you. Yes, you knew how this would end, but you also know that eventually the war does end. Humanity survives. So we cut decades into the future, long past the end of even Halo Infinite, and we see that green has returned. People have returned to rebuild. And would you look at that? The sky is blue. Noble Six really isn't much of a much when it comes to characterization. They're probably the least memorable protagonist in the entire series. But here, that lack of personality doesn't really matter because it's clear that they serve a symbolic purpose rather than a personal one. They are the last grasp of a dying world, still fighting to the bitter end for a better tomorrow. Noble Six is a vibes-based hero. There's something kind of poignant about Reach, the last Halo game made by Bungie, a game literally made so they could buy their freedom, being such a bitter downer. Even at the time, everyone working on the game knew that it wouldn't be the last Halo game. Microsoft was already in the process of setting up 343 Industries, aka the studio to make Halo games. Halo 3 would have been a nice, clean, perfect end to the franchise. Halo Reach, despite being a good game, feels more like a bitter divorce. You want another Halo game? Fine, well it's going to be grimy and dark and bitter because we hate you, Microsoft, and we're sick of making Halo games. There's a balance that every professional artist needs to find between making the art that they want to make and making the art that they need to make. And that balance is going to be different for everyone. And despite all of my issues with the game, I think Halo Reach finds that balance. It's a darker, grimier game for a darker, grimier time in video games. If nothing else, it proved the strength of the Halo format, that you can change so much of the visuals and tone and setting of the game without losing the fundamental Halo-ness of it. Much like the game itself, the end of the Bungie era is bitter, the end of the good old days, and the start of what I would call the modern era of Halo, a truly mixed bag of games if ever there was one. Bungie would go on to make another decade-spanning franchise, which is, essentially retrospective proof because of the evolving content model. I'll leave a dissection of Destiny to braver critics than me. But I think it's fair to say that the Bungie that exists now is a very different company to the crew that made Halo Reach. The entire industry is very different from when Halo Reach was around, and I know that's not just nostalgia talking, even though I have massive piles of nostalgia for this game. I guess all that's left to be said is, hey, do you remember Reach?
Our victory, your victory, was so close. I wish you could have lived to see it. But you belong to Reach. Your body, your armor, all burned and turned to glass. Everything. Except your courage. That you gave to us. And with it, we can rebuild.
Thank you for watching, and a very special thank you to my wonderful patrons for your continued support, especially Sharon Mo, who has just joined in my $20 tier. That is incredible. Thank you so much. I also noticed while I was updating the patrons, because I got a couple new ones, that I have no way to distinguish the $20 people, so we're going to be doing this. There you go. You guys are extra special and magical now. If you'd like to see your name up here or get access to Patreon exclusive videos, then please consider signing up. It means a lot to me, as do likes, comments, shares, and subscribes. We're over halfway through the Halo series now, so there's plenty of videos to go back to, which you can find up here. Or hey, for something different, why not this dissection of the historical crisis happening in the games industry right now? I do technically mention Halo Reach in that game, so there's a connection for you.